This is LiveWell Talk on benefits of exercise. I'm Dr. Dustin Arnold, Chief Medical Officer at UnityPoint Health, St. Luke's Hospital. New Year's resolutions have been established and will probably be broken, but one of the common New Year's resolutions people make is to start an exercise program, but often that gets put on the back burner, even though it's important for their health. And joining me today to discuss the benefits of exercise, how to maintain a routine, and more is Jayson Wagner, Cardiac Rehabilitation Specialist with St. Luke's Cardiac Rehab. Jayson, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Arnold.
And I apologize. I thought we'd done one before.
No, we haven't. This is my first one.
All right.
So I'm excited to be here, though. I've always thought it'd be neat to do that.
Hopefully you'll do a good job, and we'll have you come back.
Okay, I'll
so
try
if you never
my
get
best.
invited back, you'll know what sort of job
That'll
you
be
did.
an indication of my performance, I suppose. Yeah.
Yes. I want to, you don't have to be a CrossFit nut, join the CrossFit cult to get a benefit of exercise. So what is the importance of exercise for the everyday people? And then let's talk about some basic exercises they can do in their home.
Sure, and you're right about that, and that's a message that gets lost. There's so many misconceptions about exercise, and one of them is that I have to be in this fantastic shape and look like all the people on the magazines and go join someplace and be around people that make me uncomfortable and all that type of thing, and that is so far from the truth. I had a professor when I was in college who used to say, you don't have to be in really good shape, you just have to not be in really bad shape in order to improve your health. And it's a message that we try to get across to our patients also. It's a message that you have to kind of quantify a little bit, otherwise people can run with that and think that they don't have to do anything either. But you're right, when it comes to exercise, it's just doing something. People get hung up on being perfect about how much they do and how hard they work and all that type of thing. And it doesn't have to be the case. I mean, we just have to move a little bit. There's a new saying out there that sitting is the new smoking. I mean, we live in a society where for a lot of jobs, we're on our rear ends a whole lot, and that's unavoidable sometimes, but we have to find ways to shake that up a little bit, even if it's just going for little walks during the day when you have a break here and there, making those breaks and taking the time to do that.
I tell patients that sitting is the new smoking, but also once you inhale the cigarette, the cascade of damage has started and you can't stop it. You sit for a while, you can change that. You can get up.
Absolutely, you can.
So there is a solution to that that's probably easier than quitting smoking, unfortunately. I mean, I don't want to see people invest in equipment or expensive gym memberships. I know that people do it with the best intentions, but there'll be a lot of treadmills for sale in March. So what are some things that just an average person can do to stay healthy, get some benefit of moving, but not have to take out a gym membership or buy expensive machinery?
Yeah, simply, and there's nothing exciting about this, and I'll tell people this, we'll tell people this at work all the time, and they'll look at us like we're kind of crazy, like, does that really work? Is that really worth my time? But if you're at home in the evening, when you're getting supper ready, put stuff down for a second, make some laps around the house, finish what you're doing, make some laps around the house. When you're sitting watching TV, the commercials come on, make some laps around the house. Go up and down your stairs if you have them and if you're capable and everything else, just because you can. I don't have to go downstairs to get anything, but I'm going to go down there and back and forth a couple of times just to get that done. If the weather's nice, that's assuming that the weather's not great, which it normally isn't this time of year in Iowa. If the weather's nice, go for a little walk. You don't have to do the exercise all at once. If it fits your schedule or your capabilities better, I'm going to walk outside for 5 minutes and come inside and rest or do some things, and then go later on, go for another 5-minute walk and try to accumulate that. That's enough. And even if you don't get to, the standard generally is trying to get 150 minutes of aerobic exercise, so walking or riding a stationary bike, anything continuously moving, 150 minutes a week. If you don't get that 150 minutes a week, whatever you get is better than nothing, as long as you're up moving around a little bit. So simple things like that really can do the trick. Again, it doesn't get us in marvelous shape, but it's absolutely going to start to improve our health. And then the only other thing I would say in addition to that is doing some strength training exercises, which you don't have to go buy machines or barbells or even dumbbells if you don't want to. We remind our patients all the time, a gallon jug full of water is about 8.5 pounds. If 8.5 pounds is too much for you, pour half of it off, but you can go to Walmart and for $1.76 you can walk out of there with 2 gallons of distilled water. They're made to order dumbbells, really. They got a handle and everything. You can, since I can't really show anybody exercises on a podcast, you can easily Google simple home strength training exercises. You'll get a flood of answers. You can do them sitting or standing in your living room while you watch TV. Doing 5 to 10 minutes of that a couple days a week adds different benefits than the aerobic exercise does, but they're benefits that you still need when it comes to strengthening our muscles. So simple little things, just adding activity during your day can be enough. The more you do, the better, but that can be enough to really affect your health.
I used to tell patients, I still tell patients if I'm in conversation about it, for 1 month, just try to park as far away from a building as you can.
That's another great
Provided the
idea.
weather's nice.
Yep.
So you go to Target, park clear out by Blair's Ferry Road, and walk in.
Yep.
Don't try to get as close as you can.
Exactly.
You know?
Things like that. Accumulating steps. You don't have to pedometer or anything like that if you don't want to, but the more steps you can get in, however you do that, the better off you are. I knew a girl when I was a friend from home who she used to, when she was brushing her teeth, she would march in place while she was doing that, just because she, as one of the ways to get more steps in during the day, which I know seems kind of silly. It sounds silly to people, but it works. I'm reminded of a study I read, not that I'm some guy that reads lots of studies, but preparing for a talk I did a while back about the importance of activity. And this study was done in Great Britain, and they followed people who worked for the bus lines, those big red double-decker buses, and they followed the conductors who stood almost all day long and the drivers who sat almost all day long. And they followed them over time, and all things being equal, and I don't know what they corrected for necessarily, I don't remember, but the conductors by and large had far better health going forward just because they were standing. They weren't running, they weren't even walking, they were just standing, as opposed to the drivers who died young in much greater numbers than the conductors. Again, all things being equal. So that tells you right there, just by a little bit of activity, it can improve our health.
Well, we kind of kid around that, the couch potato is easy to take care of as a patient because they'll say, well, I'm just as active at 75 as I was at 55. I'm like, yeah, you were just sitting around, Yeah. Where the farmer that was active their whole life and then they get in their 80s and they can't bale hay anymore, they're just devastated.
Right, yeah.
They're hard to take care of because, Doc, I want to get back to what I was doing, last harvest.
Yep.
That's not how age works.
No, it doesn't. You can't slow those guys down.
No, and they get really frustrated when that happens.
Oh, we see it all the time too. That's that double end of the spectrum, and it's funny is working with patients in the hospital after they've had valve replacement or bypass surgery, those tend to be the patients that need the greatest help getting back, at least in the short term. And I've worked with patients who have been in their 40s and had the surgery and have spent the previous 40 plus years doing nothing at all. And they can be a tremendous amount of work to help them recover from what they're doing. And then I remember very clearly a 93-year-old patient female who had bypass surgery. I was going to see her for the first time. I went down there with a walker and a gait belt and expected to really need to help her in a lot of ways. And I got into her room. She had her robe on and had already been walking the halls on her own. And come to find out, she had spent her whole life, she grew up on a farm, of course, and then was active and made sure to maintain that activity and walked every day and whatnot. And just genetics, of course, we know play a part in that. We can't avoid some of that. But that's not all genetics. I mean, to be 93 years old and to be out walking before cardiac rehab or physical therapy even gets to you, that's a testament to what it takes. And she wasn't in just fantastic shape. She wasn't going to sprint a mile or anything like that, but she could move and she could do what she wanted to do. And that's the other thing, not only our health and our longevity, which are, I think most people are very interested in, but your quality of life for whatever time you have on earth. I mean, do you want to live in your own home? Do you want to take care of yourself and what needs to be taken care of? Or do you want to be, dependent on other people and maybe in a nursing home or something like that. And not that exercise is the only difference there, but it can make a significant difference. And if you want to have some control over what happens to you, then doing that exercise can give you some of that control, really.
Yeah, I think most patients, particularly when you talk about like anticoagulation, thinning their blood for strokes, they'd much rather run the risk of bleeding to death than having half a stroke and being dependent on their family or a burden of their family.
Correct, yeah.
I mean, almost 99.9% of patients feel that way. So it's a very common feeling. It's interesting, the doctors from the East Coast, they're like always amazed that we have like these 95-year-olds. I have a 97-year-old in the hospital right now. Guy lives alone, still does yard work.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that's the Midwest, baby.
Yeah, you bet.
I mean, we're tough out here.
You bet. The work ethic and everything else, that farm work ethic still thankfully has not entirely worked its way out of our society, even though we're not really, I guess, a farming society anymore. I mean, it's still present here, and that work ethic is very much there. And if if you stick with that and you maintain that, it just the benefits, and emotionally too. I mean, being able to move and to exercise. I mean, all the studies that show the really strong link between being in physical shape and doing something about it to maintain that physical shape, and then the reduction in dementia and the chances of Alzheimer's and things like that. I mean, I think that's something everybody also is very interested in, maintaining that type of health. I mean, it's one thing to live to be 100. It's a completely different thing for the last 20 years not to know who you are or who your family is.
Absolutely.
Or that type of thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
it gets to be just. Actually, I was taking care of a patient this weekend that was 95, still lived alone, and we had a long talk about that. How like she still does things, and and if that would change, she wouldn't want to be alive. But she still has friends and activities.
Yeah.
And she was impressive.
Yeah, that is impressive when you run into people like that. It's very impressive. It's something to shoot for, and I hope and pray that I can say the same thing at some point in my life.
When you're young and people say, take care of your health, older people, it sounds kind of silly till you get older. And
right.
You're like, that was good advice.
Yep.
Too bad I didn't follow it.
Yeah. Because you lay the groundwork early.
Yeah.
And I mean, we all know that there's always something you can do about it, but to what degree do things improve after a certain point? Now, I mean, in cardiac rehab, that's our world. I mean, secondary prevention. Okay, you had this happen, and maybe you didn't do such a great job of doing what you should have, with diet and exercise and not smoking or whatever up until this point, but you change what you're doing now, and it absolutely reduces your risk going forward, improves your chances of being healthy and being able to maintain that independence and everything else. So like we tell people, it's never too late to start, because we hear that once in a while. Less now, it seems like, than when I first started in cardiac rehab. Well, I'm not going to do that because I'm 75 years old. It's not going to help me. That is completely untrue. I mean, that is, and again, studies that, I mean, I don't read every study, but I've certainly read studies of patients they've used patients in their 70s, 80s, 90s doing aerobic exercise, strength training, and observed tremendous improvements in their health and well-being and everything else. I mean, were they like they were when they were 35? Well, no, obviously not. That's never going to happen. But get out of it what you can, and it's never too late to try.
I think you see it too, that like the hip fracture that comes in. Yeah. If the person's in relatively good shape, they do really well postoperatively. If they're not condition at all, they struggle.
Yeah, you don't have anything to draw on to start that recovery. I mean, you are starting from not only square one, but square -5, if you want to think of it that way. There's just nothing there to base that, to start that recovery on. Whereas if you have that baseline strength, endurance, and it doesn't have to be fantastic again, but that's at least a foundation to build from.
Yeah. I also tell patients that yes, a lot of us are overweight, and it's and that's fine. That's your choice, but you don't want to go into your 70s obese.
Right.
Those patients struggle.
Yeah.
Start to lose muscle mass, the coordination, the antalgic gait. They're more likely to fall. You can see a 40-year-old that's overweight but pretty darn healthy.
Yeah.
We know them.
Yep.
But seldom do you see a 75-year-old that's overweight that's healthy.
No, and it's hard that gets hard to change. Yeah. Not that it can't happen, but I mean, it's hard to start losing that. I think all of us who are over 50 know that gets tougher to do. I mean, I certainly can't exercise like I used to, although I maintain my routine. I can't eat the way I used to.
No.
There is absolutely no way. I mean, there used to be a time where I exercise enough and this and that, so I don't have to be too cautious about it. I would be, but I wouldn't. And you can't do that. I mean, if you want to, you just can't. Now, it doesn't mean you can't eat things you enjoy ever again, but you can't do that to the degree. And so when you're 70, you've got those extra pounds that you need to get rid of. It's tough too, because you can't exercise at the level that you should be able to get rid of it. The dietary changes can be very, very difficult. I mean,
Absolutely.
It just it becomes harder and harder. So it's good to take care of that ahead of time.
And we've done other podcasts. It's hard to eat healthy.
It is hard
in
to eat
this
healthy.
society.
It's
it really
very
is.
hard. There is nobody out there helping you.
No.
I mean, drive up and down First Avenue and look at the restaurants that are there. And I live in Anamosa, so I have to go down First Avenue. I've been just as guilty as anybody else. It's really easy, especially on a Friday night when my wife and kids I know aren't going to be home. I'm on my own to swing into McDonald's or wherever and grab something, and the temptation is there. It's the commercials on TV, everything else, just what's in the grocery store. It's hard, and it all tastes good too. So you don't want to not have it. But
And the worst place to eat healthy, or the most difficult place to eat healthy, is the hospital. There's no, especially this time of year, the holidays are just,
Absolutely, you bet. I mean, it's tough.
So, in summary, you don't have to train for SEAL Team 6.
No.
You need about 150 minutes of just motion a week.
Correct. Yep. Absolutely. That's the best. I mean, that will do it. If you can find a way to squeeze in 150 minutes of brisk walking, I'm breathing harder, I can still talk, and nothing hurts. And get that. If you have to chunk it out in 5 or 10 minute sessions, great. That's not possible. Yes, being active around your house, making the laps at a brisk pace, going up and down the stairs, adding in some simple strength training exercises a few days a week with those water jugs or whatever you have. That little bit can make a big difference. The thing is that we always remind people of, and people get hung up with this side of things too. If I can't get that 150 minutes this week, then I'll just skip it because it's not worth my time. I'll get it at it again next week, and the next week's busy. I'll skip next week too and just not doing it. Don't fall into that trap. Anything you do is better than nothing.
Well, here's my comeback to that one, patients, and we're all guilty of this, but if you drop your cell phone, you don't jump them down on it, you pick it back up. So if you miss Monday's workout, just pick it up Tuesday.
That's right, do it. Yeah. Just do it.
Or the diet. I fell off my diet this morning. Well, I might as well just eat cookies at lunch then,
Exactly.
You can't.
You can't. You don't want to fall into that trap. You keep trying. You keep fighting the good fight, and you do the best you can. Nobody's perfect. I mean, and that's not required. And that's the other thing we really try to push with that message. It's not required to be perfect.
All right. So listeners could listen to this award-winning podcast, Live Well Talk, each day, walk on the treadmill, and at the end of the year, be fit.
Yeah, be in a lot better shape than you were if you didn't.
As well as well-informed about topics in healthcare.
Absolutely. They'll be much more intelligent, prepared for life in many ways.
Absolutely. I can't go wrong.
I don't know why you wouldn't do it.
I don't. There's no reason not to. Jayson, thank you for joining me and sharing this advice with our listeners. Once again, this was Jayson Wagner, Cardiac Rehabilitation Specialist with St. Luke's Cardiac Rehab. To learn more about cardiac rehab and all services offered at UnityPoint Health, Cedar Rapids, visit unitypoint.org. Thank you for listening to Live Well Talk On. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, and if you want to spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your family, friends, neighbors, strangers about our podcast. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, or wherever you get your podcast. Until next time, be well.